Challenge. In the opulent yet austere chambers of the presidential suite, now draped in the heavy silence of conquest, Ruta sat alone, momentarily unburdened by the ceaseless demands of leadership. The victory over Tajera had been decisive, but the cost of it lingered in his mind, casting a shadow over the triumph that should have felt sweet. The room, once the stronghold of President Wizza, was now his domain, a symbol of his ascension to power, but also a stark reminder of the bloodshed that had paved his way. Ruta's thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a knock at the door. The disturbance was unexpected, and his instincts flared. The guard on duty entered, his expression guarded, as if unsure whether to proceed. "Guard, President Ruta, there's someone outside, demanding an audience. He insists it's urgent." Ruta raised an eyebrow, curiosity mingling with mild irritation at the intrusion. "Ruta, and who might this insistent visitor be?" "Guard, he calls himself Husey, sir. He mentioned something about a past encounter in the military fighting club. Said the result was inconclusive." At the mention of the name, Ruta's demeanor shifted. The name Husey sparked a memory, an unfinished bout, a contest that had ended without resolution. His eyes narrowed, a mix of recognition and intrigue lighting them up. Ruta, Husey. Of course. I remember him well. A formidable opponent. Let him in. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the silhouette of a tiger whose presence exuded strength and determination. Husey stepped into the room, his gaze unwavering as it locked onto Ruta. There was a tension in the air, thick and palpable, as the two warriors regarded one another, a silent acknowledgement of their unfinished business. "Husey, President Ruta, it's been a long time." "Ruta, indeed, Husey. Time hasn't dulled your spirit, I see. What brings you here today?" "Husey, our last encounter left us both without a true victor. I've come to settle that score. I seek another duel, this time, to determine who truly stands as the stronger." Ruta leaned back slightly in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He admired Husey's directness, his refusal to let go of the challenge that had once defined their rivalry. But the smirk didn't quite reach his eyes. Instead, they remained cold and calculating, weighing the implications of this request. "Ruta, a rematch. You've come to challenge me, Husey, even now when the stakes are higher than they've ever been? Interesting. But you must understand, our battles now extend beyond the mere physical. The world has changed." Husey, a glint of defiance in his eyes, "I'm well aware of how the world has changed, Ruta. And I'm not here just for myself. This isn't just about us. It's about what we represent." Ruta's smirk faded, replaced by a more serious expression. He could see that this was no longer just about pride or unfinished business. Husey's words hinted at something deeper, a challenge not only to his physical prowess, but perhaps to the very ideals that Ruta had come to embody. Ruta, rising from his seat, his voice low but firm, "You speak of resolve and principle, Husey, but this world is ruled by power and control. What we do here, now, is more than a fight. It's a reflection of the forces shaping the future." Husey, taking a step closer, his voice steady, "That's exactly why this duel matters, Ruta. It's not just about who's stronger, it's about who's right. Who will lead the future? You and I, we represent different paths, and only one can prevail." The tension in the room thickened, the atmosphere charged with the weight of their words. The history between them was complex, filled with mutual respect and rivalry, and now, it seemed, their fates were intertwined once more. But this was not the time for a physical clash. The confrontation was not yet ready to reach its crescendo, not when the political landscape was still shifting under their feet. Ruta, after a pause, nodding, "Very well, Husey. I accept your challenge, but not today. When we fight again, it will be when the world is watching, when the stakes are at their highest. Until then, we prepare, for the real battle is yet to come." Husey, with a nod of acknowledgement, "I'll be ready, Ruta. Don't keep me waiting too long." With that, Husey turned and left the room, leaving Ruta alone once more, but not unchanged. The encounter had stirred something in him, an awareness that his path, however mighty it seemed, was not without its challengers. The clash between them was inevitable, but it would come at the right time, when the world's eyes were upon them. The door closed softly, sealing the moment between them. The echoes of their rivalry, their unresolved contest, would reverberate through the corridors of power until the day came when they would face each other again, not just as fighters, but as representatives of two divergent paths in a world teetering on the edge of change. Their words carried the weight of nations, and their rivalry, left hanging in the air, promised to shape the course of events yet to unfold. Echoes of redemption. In the quiet aftermath of the brutal war that had torn Tajera asunder, the once vibrant city of Tiz now lay in ruins, its streets echoing with the haunting memories of battles lost and won. The air was thick with the scent of ash and dust, a poignant reminder of the devastation that had swept through the land. Amidst the rubble and the silent cries of a defeated nation, two figures stood poised for a confrontation that transcended the physical realm, a clash that would echo through the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed the war's bitter end. In a secluded chamber, far from the prying eyes of the world, Ruda and Husey faced each other, their expressions a complex mixture of resolve and unspoken tension. The room was devoid of any adornments or symbols of power, stripped bare to serve as an arena for a duel that held meaning far beyond the walls that contained it. Here, there were no soldiers to command, no territories to conquer, only the raw, primal force of two warriors who had been shaped and scarred by the crucible of war. Ruda, the newly anointed leader of Guerrillist, had risen to power on the back of a victorious campaign that had crushed Tajera and brought its people to their knees. Yet, even in his triumph, there was a restlessness within him, a need to prove, not to others, but to himself, that his strength extended beyond the battlefield. The hammer he now wielded had become an extension of his will, a symbol of his authority and the unyielding force he represented. It was a weapon of raw power, capable of shattering bones and cleaving through flesh with terrifying ease. Ruda had honed his skill with the hammer to perfection, each swing a calculated expression of dominance. Across from him stood Husey, once the proud general of Tajera's armies, now a man stripped of his command, his nation, and nearly everything that had once defined him. Yet, in this moment, there was no fear in Husey's eyes, only a steely determination that burned brighter with each passing second. The years had tempered him, forged him into something more than just a soldier or a leader. He was a warrior, and though his nation lay in ruins, his spirit remained unbroken. For Husey, this duel was not just a fight, it was a chance to reclaim a piece of his honor, to stand tall in the face of overwhelming odds and assert that Tajera's legacy could not be so easily erased. The room seemed to shrink around them, the silence heavy with the anticipation of the impending clash. Ruda's grip tightened around the handle of his hammer, the weight of the weapon a familiar comfort in his hands. He steadied Husey carefully, noting the controlled breath, the centered stance, the way the tiger's muscles coiled like a spring, ready to unleash with lethal precision. Ruda, Husey, you stand before me now, not as a general, but as a warrior stripped of everything. Yet I see no fear in your eyes. Tell me, what drives you to this confrontation? Husey met Ruda's gaze with unwavering intensity, his voice steady as he replied. Husey, you took my land, my people, and shattered the pride of Tajera. But you cannot take my honor, Ruda. I fight today not just for myself, but for every soul that fell under the Guerrillist banner. This is not about victory or defeat, it's about showing that even in our darkest hour, Tajera's spirit remains unbroken. Ruda's eyes narrowed, a flicker of respect mingling with the cold resolve in his gaze. He understood the weight of Husey's words, the depth of his conviction. This was not a battle that could be won with brute strength alone. It was a test of will, a clash of ideologies as much as a contest of physical prowess. Ruda, you speak of spirit, Husey, but spirit alone did not win this war. Power did. The strength to crush your enemies, to impose your will upon the world, that is the true path to greatness. This duel is not just about us, it is a reflection of the new order that I have forged. Guerrillist stands as the beacon of that power, and I will show you that your resistance, noble as it may be, is futile. The tension between them crackled like a live wire, the air thick with the promise of violence. Yet, for all the intensity of their words, there was an unspoken understanding between the two, a recognition that this moment, this clash, was something that had been inevitable from the start. Both men had walked paths that had led them to this confrontation, and now, in the quiet of the room, they would face the truth of what they had become. Duel of Titans. The air in the room was thick with tension, the kind that only comes before a battle where the stakes go beyond victory. This was no ordinary confrontation. It was a clash of ideologies, of destinies, of two forces that had been on a collision course since the very beginning. Ruda and Husey stood facing each other, both warriors aware that this was the moment that would determine more than just the outcome of their personal rivalry. It would echo the broader conflict between Guerillist and Tajera, shaping the fate of their nations. Husey, his eyes locked onto Ruda's, spoke first, breaking the silence with a voice that carried the weight of history. I lost to you at the military fighting club not because of your strength or tactics. I lost because of the judgment of those bastards from Leoni's and Birais. I'm not satisfied. I have to fight you again, here and now, without a referee. Ruda's response was measured, a knowing smile playing on his lips as he acknowledged Husey's challenge. Today, only one of us will walk out of this door. If you win, the guards will let you go without hindrance. But if you lose, Husey, you'll leave here knowing that Guerillist is truly the stronger force. With those words, the fight began. There were no ceremonial bows, no formal declarations, just an explosion of movement as both men lunged at each other with the speed and precision that only years of intense training could produce. Husey was the first to strike, his cross kick aimed directly at Ruda's left rib. The power behind the kick was enough to break bones, but Ruda was ready. He moved with a grace that belied his size, his body twisting just enough to let the kick sail past him without making contact. In the same fluid motion, Ruda retaliated with a taekwondo axe kick, his leg slicing through the air like a guillotine aimed at Husey's head. But Husey was prepared. He raised his arms in a perfect block, absorbing the impact with a grunt before stepping back to reassess his opponent. The room seemed to shrink as they closed the distance again, their movements a blur of kicks, punches, and blocks. Each attack was met with a counter, each feint with a response. They moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, their bodies weaving around each other in a display of martial prowess that transcended the physical and entered the realm of pure instinct. Ruda's spinning punch came next, a move that had felled many opponents in the past. But Husey wasn't just any opponent. He saw the punch coming and took a quick step backward, letting the blow miss him by inches. In an instant, he countered with a low sweep aimed at Ruda's legs, trying to take him off his feet. But Ruda jumped, avoiding the sweep and landing lightly on the balls of his feet, ready for the next exchange. Time seemed to stretch and contract as the battle raged on. More than 10 minutes passed, though to the combatants it felt like an eternity and an instant all at once. Sweat glistened on their bodies, their muscles straining under the effort of sustaining such a high level of intensity. The room echoed with the sounds of their clashes, the dull thud of flesh meeting flesh, the sharp exhalations of breath as they pushed themselves to their limits. There was no clear advantage, no moment when one seemed to gain the upper hand over the other. They were evenly matched in strength, in speed, and skill. Each time one seemed to be gaining momentum, the other would counter, turning the tide back in their favor. It was a battle not just of bodies, but of wills, of minds locked in a deadly game of strategy and endurance. And as they fought, it became clear that this was more than just a duel, it was a test, a proving ground for the philosophies that each man represented. Ruda, the embodiment of guerrillist ambition, of the belief that strength and power were the keys to shaping the world. Husey, the spirit of Tajera, a symbol of resistance and honor, fighting not just for victory but for the soul of his nation. The battle continued, each man drawing on reserves of strength they hadn't known they possessed. There was no yielding, no hesitation. Just the relentless drive to overcome, to prove once and for all who was the stronger warrior. The room around them seemed to fade away, the world outside forgotten as they became completely absorbed in their duel. In those moments, there were no Guerillist or Tajera, no victors or vanquished, only two warriors, each giving everything they had, each pushing the other to the very edge of their abilities. And in that crucible of combat, something was forged between them, something that went beyond the outcome of the fight. It was a mutual respect, a recognition of the strength and resolve that each possessed. As they continued to fight, neither man could say for certain how it would end. There was no clear path to victory, no obvious weakness to exploit. It was a battle that could go on indefinitely, each round of blows only deepening the connection between them, the understanding that they were two sides of the same coin. The final blow. The battle between Ruda and Husey had raged on, each strike and counterstrike bringing them closer to their limits. Their bodies were drenched in sweat, their muscles aching, but neither was willing to yield. The stakes were too high, and the weight of their nations rested on their shoulders. For Tajera, Husey fought not just for himself, but for the pride of a fallen country. For Guerillist, Ruda fought to solidify his dominance, to prove that his victory over Tajera was absolute. But as the battle wore on, it became clear that they were approaching the breaking point. The room, which had once been filled with the thunderous sounds of their combat, now echoed with the heavy breathing of two warriors on the edge of exhaustion. Each man had given everything he had, and now it was down to who could outlast the other. The turning point came suddenly, a moment that would decide the outcome of the fight. Their fists collided with a force that reverberated through the room, the impact sending shockwaves up their arms. It was a blow that seemed to freeze time, a moment where the tide of battle shifted irrevocably. Husey, momentarily staggered, felt a sharp pain radiate from his hand, as if the very bones within were on the verge of breaking. The weakness that crept into his hand spread like a poison, slowing his movements and dulling his reflexes. Ruda, sensing the shift in Husey's strength, seized the opportunity with the precision of a seasoned warrior. He moved swiftly, delivering a low kick to Husey's left leg. The kick landed with a resounding thud, buckling Husey's knee and throwing him off balance. Before Husey could recover, Ruda followed up with a powerful uppercut to his chin. The force of the blow lifted Husey off his feet, sending him crashing to the floor. For a moment, the room was silent, the only sound the heavy breathing of the two men. Husey lay on the ground, his body aching from the relentless assault. He tried to push himself up, to summon the strength to continue, but his body refused to obey. The pain in his hand, his leg, his chin, it was too much. He had reached his limit. Ruda stood over him, breathing heavily, his chest heaving from the exertion. He looked down at Husey, the man who had once been his equal, now defeated. The sight of Husey on the ground, unable to rise, was a stark symbol of Tajera's defeat against Guerillist. It was a moment that encapsulated the entire conflict, the strength of Guerillist overpowering the resistance of Tajera. As the guards entered the room to assist Husey, Ruda stood tall, the embodiment of Guerillist's strength and endurance. The door closed behind them, leaving Ruda alone with his thoughts, the echoes of the battle lingering in the room. Breathing heavily, Ruda acknowledged both the internal and external battles he had faced to reach this moment. "He's not inferior to me in strength and martial arts," Ruda muttered to himself, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and self-assurance. "I'm better than him in endurance." In that quiet moment, Ruda understood that it was not just physical strength that had won him the fight, but the ability to outlast his opponent, to endure when others would have faltered. It was this endurance that had led him to victory, both in this battle and in the larger war against Tajera. The room, now silent, seemed to reflect the weight of the decision that had just been made. Husey's defeat was the final blow, not just in their personal rivalry, but in the conflict between their nations. With Husey's fall, Tajera's last hope of resistance crumbled, leaving the path clear for Ruda and Guerillist to impose their will on the defeated nation. As Ruda stood there, the weight of his victory settled over him. He had won, but at what cost? The battle was over, but the war within him had just begun. The room, once filled with the sounds of combat, was now a place of reflection, a place where Ruda would come to terms with the choices he had made and the path he had chosen.